Welcome to a place where history isn't just remembered, but relived moments, frozen in time, waiting to pull us away from the chaos of modern life. Tonight, you step into a land where sandals slap dusty ground and mountain wind whistles through bronze-clad ridges. Spartan land. Harsh, sun-cracked, pine-scented. Everything smells like sweat leather and very old ambition. The shadows are sharp, the voices low, the expectations insanely high. You are not a king, not a hero, not even a hoplite with a shiny red cloak. You are just average, an ordinary Spartan or as close to ordinary as this society allows. And that means from the moment you're born, your life is no longer your own. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're already sinking into your mattress like a soldier sinking into formation, don't forget to post your location. And local time. I love seeing where in the world you're drifting off. Wherever you are, I hope tonight brings you rest, comfort, and maybe a curious dream or two. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink open your eyes and realize you're new to this world. Newborn, in fact. Welcome to Sparta. Not exactly the most welcoming place to start life. The room is bare but clean. The floor is stone. The voices are stern, purposeful. The midwife mutters something to herself, probably a prayer to Artemis, goddess of childbirth. Or maybe she's just hoping this one's not too scrawny. Because here's the first reality check: Spartan babies don't get warm lullabies. They get inspected. You feel hands lift you up. You're slippery, wiggling, confused. A stern elder leans in. He doesn't smile. He doesn't ask for a name. He just studies your limbs, your eyes, your little fists. Historians still argue whether this inspection always happened or if it was exaggerated later, but ancient writers like Plutarch were convinced if you didn't look healthy, you were left to die. Not out of cruelty, they said. Out of logic. Out of the belief that Sparta couldn't waste resources on the weak. So, you tiny average, you are incredibly lucky. Your bones are straight. Your lungs scream with newborn rage. You get a nod. The elder approves. And that nod is the first victory of your life. It means you get to exist. Your return to your mother, tough, unsentimental, but not unkind. Spartan women were known for their strength, their sharp wit, and their complete refusal to coddle. She wraps you in cloth and mutters something like, "Try not to die stupidly." It's almost affection. You spend your early years running barefoot on packed dirt, chewing on roasted barley, and learning not to cry when you fall. Because here, crying is seen as a sign that maybe your bones weren't as solid as the elders thought. You learn quickly that your parents are not your primary teachers. That role belongs to Sparta itself. And soon the city will come to collect. But for now, your days are filled with blunt toys, gritty food, and adults who never lie to children because life won't either. Here's a quirky tidbit to cradle as you fall asleep. Some ancient accounts claim Spartan babies were dipped in wine instead of water after birth, supposedly to harden them, supposedly to detect weakness, or maybe just to make sure they got their first taste of glory early. Or maybe it was just a weird regional habit no one questioned. And here's another detail whispered down through time. Spartan mothers didn't sing soft lullabies. They were more likely to recite heroic poetry or instruct you sternly on how to die well. Because childhood here isn't a time of innocence. It's a time of preparation. You won't have long to just be a child. The city is waiting. The elders are watching. And if you make it to age 7, the real trials begin. But for tonight, your eyes are closing. The wind outside is soft. Somewhere nearby, someone sharpens a blade for training tomorrow, but you're just a newborn, still swaddled, still safe. For now. The dawn is gentle, too gentle for Sparta. You blink against the light, now older, leaner, and no longer cradled in your mother's arms. Because today you are 7, and that means everything changes. Your feet are bare. Your tunic itches. Your future has arrived early, clutching a cane and barking instructions. Because in Sparta, age 7 is not the start of school. It's the start of military indoctrination. You don't walk to class, you're taken. No hugs, no warm send-off. Your mother gives you a nod the same kind your father once gave you in the womb. It means make it back or don't. And so begins your long march into the Agog, the infamous Spartan training system that transforms children into soldiers, or at least tries to. Historians still argue whether the Agage was as brutally systematic as later sources claimed. But the image remains clear: this wasn't school. It was boot camp for children. Permanent, exhausting, barely survivable. And if you ask a Spartan, glorious. You arrive at the dormitory. It's not much a long, dim hall that smells like sweat and lentils. There's no bed, just reed mats stacked in corners. No chairs, no privacy. Definitely no personal blankets with cartoon hoplites on them. You are no longer a child. You are now a state project. An older boy, maybe 12, is assigned as your mentor, not to comfort you, but to toughen you. He'll teach you how to walk, speak, eat, and sleep like a Spartan. He might hit you, probably will. You'll be expected to hit back eventually. You'll learn not to complain, not to flinch, not to eat unless told, not to speak unless spoken to. And you'll do it all with nothing but one tunic per year. Winter, same tunic. Summer, still the same. Your skin will thicken or crack. Your feet will harden or blister. No sandals, ever. Because pain is not the enemy, comfort is. You eat in a mess hall now, a group of boys gulping down what amounts to boiled barley onions and something vaguely animal adjacent. You learn not to gag. That's a sign of weakness. And your training begins immediately. Not with swords, not with shields, but with obedience. One of your first lessons is to walk silently in formation, hands behind your back, eyes forward. You do this for hours. No one tells you why. Then you recite poems. Yes, poems. You're drilled in verse, taught to speak clearly, to enunciate, to sound like a warrior poet. Because Spartans weren't just fighters. They were performers of discipline. Here's your first quirky tidbit: part of your training involves learning musical rhythm. Why? Because hoplite combat is based on synchronized movement. If you can't march to a beat, you'll trip over your comrade's shield, and that's very un-Spartan of you. And here's your second: you'll be publicly evaluated often, at meals and training, during inspections. Your body is scrutinized, your posture, your voice. If you stand poorly, you're whipped. If you answer too quickly, you're corrected. If you show fear, let's not even go there. Discipline isn't just demanded, it's ingrained. But you're not alone. Around you, dozens of other 7-year-olds struggle just as much. You learn to bond quickly. These boys will become your comrades, your rivals, and if you survive long enough, your fellow soldiers. There are moments of kindness. They're rare, brief, and often wordless. A slightly larger boy helps you up after you fall during drills. Someone nudges half a fig towards you at dinner. No one speaks of these things, but you feel them. Because even in Sparta, the human need for connection slips through the cracks. Still, you won't see your family much anymore. Your parents may pass you in the market and nod. That's it. You don't visit home. You don't receive letters. You are now the city's responsibility. And the city expects results. You drift off now on your reed mat. Your stomach growls. Your skin is dusty. One knee throbs from a training fall. A trainer's voice echoes in your ear. Hunger makes you sharp. You believe it. And you tell yourself, this make it to 10 and things will get easier. Spoiler, they don't. But you're still here. That's more than many can say. You wake before the sun. Not because someone gently calls your name or a rooster crows from a picturesque hilltop. No, you wake because someone kicked your foot. That's the Spartan alarm clock. You sit up on your reed mat, stiff, sore, itchy from yesterday's dust, and remember you're 10 now, which means you've made it 3 full years in the agage. You still only get one tunic, still no shoes, still no softness. But you've learned to move through this life like a ghost with bruised shins. You eat fast, you sleep faster, you obey instantly. You are still a child technically, but only in the biological sense. Emotionally, physically, psychologically, you're being sculpted into a tool. Your mornings begin with inspection. A trainer called a paidonomos pokes your ribs, checks your spine, tilts your chin with a wooden cane. You stand tall. You do not blink. You do not ask questions. He scowls anyway. Good. Then comes the run. Spartans don't stretch. They don't jog casually. You're expected to sprint barefoot across uneven terrain before breakfast through dirt and grit and whatever sharp rocks nature decided to scatter that day. If you fall, you get up. If you bleed, it's extra training for your pain threshold. Somewhere between mile 1 and mile 2, you feel the rhythm. Your breath like a forge bellows your arms swinging like rope. It's not elegant, but it's controlled, and that's the goal. Because the real test in Sparta isn't talent, it's endurance. Later, you train in mock combat. At 10, you're still too young for real weapons. But wooden sticks, fair game. You form a circle, and then two of you are thrown into the middle. It's not random. The trainers choose pairs deliberately small versus tall, quick versus strong, loud versus silent. You fight, not to win, but to learn how not to lose control. Pain isn't punished, but weakness is. Here's your first quirky tidbit. Spartans believed that self-control was the highest form of strength. The louder you cried, the more punishment you got. If you stayed calm through bruises, bleeding noses, and a fractured ego, you earned quiet nods of respect. And here's another curiosity. Unlike in Athens or other Greek cities, you don't learn much arithmetic. No fancy geometry. No philosophy. Your education is military and moral. You memorize verses from Tyrtaeus, the poet of Spartan discipline. Not because they're fun, but because they remind you who you are supposed to become. Do not fear death, one line says, for it will meet you only once. That's the kind of thing that gets recited during burpee drills. You begin to feel your world narrowing. You don't dream of becoming a farmer or merchant. You don't imagine a future where you invent something or travel to exotic islands. No. You're here to become a hoplite, a shield bearer, one link in Sparta's great unbending chain. And yet there are slivers of rebellion. Quiet ones. Some nights you whisper jokes to the boy next to you. You learn how to smile without showing teeth, how to share scraps of food without being caught, how to patch your tunic with stolen thread. Because yes, stealing is part of the training. Not officially, of course. But the unspoken rule is, if you need food or supplies, you take them. If you get away with it, you're clever. If you're caught, you're punished not for stealing, but for failing. You start learning where the camp store food, which trainers are inattentive, which kids are too full to notice a missing fig. It's a strange morality, but it makes sense here. You're not learning ethics, you're learning survival strategy. And survival is not just physical, it's social. Every week someone gets humiliated, mocked for slouching, for stuttering, for not keeping pace. And every week someone else earns praise for leadership, for boldness, for pulling another boy to safety in a training simulation. You notice which boys are gaining attention. You try to mimic them, or avoid them, or challenge them. Because friendships here are complicated. You're encouraged to bond. Deeply, emotionally, even physically, though always under the watchful eye of Spartan law. Some boys pair off in mentor-student relationships that resemble more than just brotherhood. Historians still argue whether these relationships were romantic, platonic, pedagogical, or all of the above. The truth is, the ancient sources are vague on purpose. What mattered most to the Spartans was loyalty, that the bond between men in battle would be stronger than fear. You drift asleep thinking of one such friend. He helped you today during drills, offered you a corner of his bread. You didn't thank him out loud, but he nodded anyway. In Sparta, that's practically a hug. Tonight your back aches, your hands are scabbed, but your heart oddly is steady. You may be average, but you're still here. The days blur now, mud, sun, hunger, repetition. You're 12. The tunic is even shorter on your growing frame. Your limbs ache in ways that suggest you're finally becoming what Sparta wants. But deep down you know you are still not enough. Because now the training gets worse, and strangely more poetic. You rise before dawn. You no longer need to be kicked awake. Your body in its own sleep-deprived way does the job. You splash your face with cold water from a stone basin, rub grit from your eyes, and head to the yard. Today's breakfast air and determination. The trainers begin with poetry recitation. Yes, again. You thought you'd left verse behind with babyhood, but here it is braided into the blood and sweat. Tirtius again. Always Tertius. Let us fight with spirit and courage for our country, our children, and our wedded wives. You mumble the lines, not from boredom, but from fatigue. But still you know them by heart. These words are a daily rhythm like your footfalls on packed earth. Why poetry? Why songs? Historians still argue whether the Spartans truly prioritized verse, or if that part of their tradition was idealized later. But you're here, and you're expected to speak like a soldier, sing like one too. The strange irony, you're being molded into a creature of war through music, memory, and starvation. Ah, yes, the starvation. You are fed just enough to stay upright, never enough to feel full. This is by design. Hunger sharpens your instincts, keeps you alert, makes you desperate. And desperation, they say, breeds cunning. Today, a boy gets caught stealing a cheese wheel from the kitchens. You didn't see it, but you hear the cries, then the silence. He'll be punished tonight, but not for the theft or the failure to hide it. Meanwhile, your own belly growls. You glance at a fig tree beyond the training yard. You file its location away for later. Nightfall might bring opportunity. Here's a quirky fact to chew on, like undercooked lentils. Spartan boys were sometimes encouraged to steal not just food, but materials, tools, anything they could make use of. It was less about theft and more about honing their ability to act without hesitation, to think on their feet. Second fringe detail. You may be assigned to sleep outdoors soon, not for punishment. Just as a test, no blanket, no shelter. If it rains, it rains. If wolves howl in the hills, you listen. And you're expected to return unharmed, alert, and with the story worth telling. You are being trained to endure everything except pity. And yet there's camaraderie. Your mess group, the small team of boys you eat, train, and whisper with, has become your surrogate family. You all know who limps, who jokes, who sings off-key. You begin to rely on one another without saying a word. In Spartan society, there are no lone wolves, only phalanxes, tight interlocking human shields, individualism. That's an Athenian disease. Your body now knows pain intimately. Not injury necessarily, but constant ache, constant edge. You don't heal as quickly because you're never quite rested, but your posture has improved. Your voice is deeper. And when your trainer barks an order, you react before your brain even catches up. This is what the agog does, it rewires you. But there are moments small, nearly imperceptible, when you remember softness. A bird nesting on the temple ledge. A breeze that smells like honey and not sweat. The way the moonlight spills across the floor of the mess hall and makes everything briefly seem peaceful. These tiny fragments don't last, but they are yours. You store them deep where the state can't reach. And then you return to drills. Your spear is wooden, your sandals still missing, but your stance has improved. You learn to thrust, pivot, retreat, and breathe through your nose. You learn to watch your opponent's eyes, not their hands. You're not ready for battle, not even close. But your movements are beginning to look like memory, as if your body has already fought, even if your soul hasn't caught up yet. You will train until the training becomes identity. You'll fast until hunger becomes discipline. You'll endure until hardship becomes instinct. And you'll lie down on your reed mat tonight, not comfortable, but closer to something unbreakable. You are 12. You are average. But you are beginning to vanish into Spartan perfection. And no one, not even you, can say exactly where you went. The dust from morning drills still clings to your knees, your elbows, the crook of your neck. It never really leaves. Dirt is a second skin now, just part of being 13 in Sparta. You no longer flinch at hunger. You no longer notice bruises until someone points them out. What you notice instead are the people around you, the way your messmates move. Breathe crack jokes at night when the trainers are out of earshot. Because now you're old enough to understand this is a game of endurance, yes, but also a game of alliances. You begin to form bonds that run deeper than obedience. Not quite friendship. Something quieter. Something forged by shared suffering and stolen bread crusts. Your closest messmate. He limps slightly on his left side but runs faster than most. His laugh sounds like a cough, and he's missing a front tooth thanks to a training accident involving a practice spear and an overambitious lunge. But he's the one who showed you how to wrap your fingers with thread to avoid split knuckles. You haven't forgotten. He's also the one you've fought with, literally in the ring. Twice. Once you won, once he did. Neither of you apologized. Because Spartan affection is expressed through combat, quiet loyalty, and shared silence. And today your silence is tested. A new recruit joins your cohort. Younger, smaller, nervous. His tunic is too clean, and he still walks like someone expecting kindness. Your trainer snarls his name and pushes him toward you. Teach him is all he says. So you do. Not with words, but with example. You show him how to knot his belt properly, where to stand in formation, how to avoid the trainer's line of sight when your knees start to buckle from drills. You're still a student, but now you're also a mentor in the way Spartans do, mentoring, no coddling, no comfort, just presence. Historians still argue whether Spartan peer mentorship created deeper bonds or just institutionalized hierarchy. Either way it worked. No one survives the agoge alone. At night, you share a roasted onion with the boy. You don't explain why, he just nods. He'll pass it on someday. And so pain becomes ritual. Take this morning's training, for example. The tasks stand barefoot on sun-heated stones while reciting verses. If you pause, the paidonomos taps your thigh with a cane. If you stammer, he taps harder. You get through all 4 verses. The cane only taps you once. You consider that a win. Later, you and the others are ordered to scale the training wall bare hands, no ropes. It's deliberately crumbling. Half the stones come loose under your weight. One boy falls hard, sprains his wrist. No one rushes to help. He gets up on his own, teeth gritted. The trainers nod approvingly. Here's your first fringe detail. Some ancient sources claim Spartans would smile while being whipped, especially during endurance contests. Not because they liked it, obviously, but because it proved something to the crowd, to the gods, and to themselves. Second quirky note. Spartans sometimes held singing contests between age groups. Not for entertainment, but to reinforce discipline through competitive harmony. You've seen it once older boys in chorus voices, sharp and rhythmic, while the younger boys listened in tense silence. You'll have to sing soon, too. And gods help you if your pitch wobbles. Singing, fighting, suffering, they're all just different verses in the same Spartan song. You begin to understand that strength in Sparta isn't about brutality. It's about mastery of body, of voice, of pain, of self. You also begin to notice something else. Your emotions are muted, not gone, but dulled. You no longer feel fear before punishment, only anticipation. You no longer miss your family, only remember them in flashes your mother's calloused hand, your father's distant silhouette. Even joy feels like a luxury. A smirk during drills, a shared joke about black broth that made someone choke. Those are your highs now. Because the agoge doesn't just teach you how to fight. It teaches you how to vanish into obedience, how to become invisible until needed. A blade in a scabbard. But beneath that scabbard, you're still there. Still you. Still watching. Tonight you lie on your mat, bruised and barely warm. Your messmate next to you murmurs something sleepy, maybe a joke, maybe a prayer. You don't answer, but you hear it, and you remember it. Because even in Sparta, the soul doesn't disappear. It just learns to whisper. The sun glares down like a judgmental elder god. Your feet, of course, are bare. Always bare. And today they slap the stones of the training yard harder than usual because your mess group is late. Late by Spartan standards, mind you, which means someone hesitated for 2 heartbeats before lining up. Punishment follows swift and unceremonious. You're all told to run the perimeter again this time while carrying stones in your tunics. It's hot. The stones are hot. Your tunic rides up and your ribs ache from the pressure. You do not complain. None of you do. Complaining is for non-Spartans. You are now 14, which in Sparta is roughly equivalent to being both a young wolf and a future coffin filler. Old enough to be watched carefully, young enough to still be broken. And today something truly grim happens. Your mess is assigned to food duty. You've been craving this moment access to the storage crates, a close look at the rare olives, the hint of honey sometimes used in rituals. But there in the back of the kitchen you see it. A pot boiling black broth. You've heard of it, of course, but seeing it up close feels like staring into myth. The smell, somewhere between burned meat vinegar and depression. You're handed a ladle, you pour a scoop for the elders. They don't even flinch as they eat. Their taste buds, it seems, died around age 30. And now you must eat too. The texture is thick. The salt stings your lips. You manage a swallow, but you gag on the second. A trainer notices. He raises an eyebrow. You swallow again. Victory. Because in Sparta, even eating is a performance. Here's your first quirky fact. The infamous black broth was made from pig's blood vinegar and salt, a kind of edible dare masquerading as cuisine. Outsiders mocked it, but Spartans swore by it, claiming it strengthened the blood and the will. Second quirky note. Spartan elders often ate this broth as a symbol of humility, reinforcing the idea that strength lies not in indulgence, but in enduring the unbearable cheerfully. In this mess hall, it's now your second home. At 14, your mess group becomes a brotherhood. You eat with the same small group of boys every single day. You share bread, black broth, roasted onions, maybe a boiled egg if someone was especially obedient. You sit on stone benches, knees touching, eyes low. Talking is limited, but laughter sometimes sneaks in dry, whispery laughter, the kind that doesn't wake the trainers. Historians still argue whether these mess groups were purely practical or deeply psychological. What's clear is they bond you in hunger and discipline, and they become the rhythm of your life. You know who gulps, who chews with a tilt, who pretends not to mind the broth. You recognize each boy's cough, his limp, the way he tugs his tunic when nervous. It's like being married to 7 other people, none of whom bathe regularly, and still somehow you care for them. The communal life is total. You don't own much, just your tunic, a blanket, and a wooden cup. Everything else is shared or state-issued. Even your opinions are expected to align with Spartan values. But you start to notice the cracks, quietly. You overhear a trainer mumbling about food rations, an elder sighing after a long cough, another boy whispering that the harvest was weak this year. It's your first hint that Sparta isn't invincible. That maybe the machine you're training to serve is just a collection of aging gears oiled with myth and tradition. Still, you train. Today's exercise is formation drills. You learn to interlock your wooden shield with others to move as one to trust that the boy beside you won't stumble. One stumbles, you all fall. You do it again and again until the sun sinks behind the mountains and your arms shake with fatigue. Your reward another bowl of black broth. You sip it with more confidence this time. Because here's the truth, it still tastes terrible. But you don't care anymore. You lie down tonight on your reed mat beside your messmates. One is softly snoring, another twitches in his sleep. You pull your blanket higher. The wind slips through the dormitory window, cool and pine-scented. And for a brief moment, you feel something that almost resembles comfort. Or maybe just exhaustion with a nice aftertaste. You've started waking up before the trainers do. Not out of anticipation, out of habit. At 15, your body no longer waits for instruction. It rises when the sky is still dim, when the mess hall still smells faintly of smoke and vinegar, when even the cicadas are groggy. This morning you sit quietly on your mat and stare at the stone wall across from you. There's nothing remarkable about it, just age-darkened limestone patched over centuries. But your eyes linger, because today you feel something new. Restlessness. Not the twitchy juvenile kind, a deeper kind. The kind that comes when a young soldier begins to wonder if he's a person or just an instrument sharpened by hands not his own. You stretch, roll your shoulders, and wait for the shout. It comes as it always does. Formation in 5 breaths, no excuses. You and your messmates fall into line like water into a jug-fluid automatic familiar. You know each other so well now that you can move without words without even looking. And still, something feels off. Because at 15, you've learned everything they told you would make you strong, and now you're beginning to ask what they left out. Today's drills are sparring matches. One-on-one with wooden swords. You've done it hundreds of times, but today you're paired with someone new, a boy from another unit. Taller, quieter. His stance is perfect. The match begins. You circle, jab, parry. He doesn't smile. You don't either. But you feel something stirring. Competitiveness, curiosity, recognition. You lose just barely. A tap to your ribs ends it. You nod. He nods. In Sparta, that's equivalent to exchanging life stories and hugging twice. Later during cleaning duty, you spot him again. He's scrubbing the stone tiles beside the training yard. You approach not to talk, just to scrub nearby. In a city of silence, proximity is friendship. Here's your first quirky tidbit. Some Spartan boys at this age were known to form deep, almost monastic partnerships. Intellectual, physical, emotional. The word for it was Erastes and Eromenos, lover and beloved. But again, historians still argue whether this dynamic was common, idealized, or ritualized beyond recognition. Your second fringe detail. You might soon be selected as an assistant to an elder, a kind of live-in aide and apprentice. It's considered an honor, a step toward citizenship. But it also means polishing someone else's sandals and fetching broth at odd hours. You hope you're not chosen. But you also hope you are. Because that would mean they see something in you. And here's the tension: you want to be invisible and exceptional at the same time. As twilight creeps in, you and the other boys are ordered to recite poetry again. Tyrtaeus, of course. Always Tyrtaeus. The man had more influence over your adolescence than your own parents. Let him who is brave be honored in the city, loved in peace, and feared in war. You say the words evenly. You believe half of them. Maybe that's enough. Dinner is leaner than usual tonight. Rumors circulate. A shipment from the countryside didn't arrive. The trainers don't comment, but their brows are tight. You and your messmates shared 2 onions and some barley mash. No broth tonight, you miss it. Which is deeply concerning. As you chew, you think of home. Not your actual house. You haven't seen it in nearly a decade. But the idea of home, of a world where people wake up without being shouted at, where meals don't feel like tasks, where you're something other than a potential weapon. Then one of your messmates farts during a moment of silence, and suddenly the entire bench shakes with suppressed laughter. No one dares break the rules out loud. But under the table, someone nudges your knee. You smile just a little. You're still human after all. You lie down later that night, arms behind your head, staring at the wooden beams above. Your muscles throb, but it's a familiar ache now, almost companionable. You wonder about that boy you sparred with. If he's also lying awake. If he's also trying to remember what he used to dream about before Sparta took over his imagination. Maybe tomorrow you'll try speaking to him. Just a sentence. A risk. But then again, isn't that what Spartans are trained for? At 16, something strange begins to happen. You stop noticing how strange everything is. The daily beating's normal. The black broth familiar. The sensation of waking up sore, underfed, and emotionally dehydrated routine. But what's new, what's frighteningly new, is how competent you feel. Your spear drills are precise. Your shield handling efficient. You can now run uphill for hours barefoot while reciting poetry about glorious death and not miss a beat. You've even developed a sort of Spartan sixth sense, able to predict which trainer is going to assign extra punishment just by the way he cracks his knuckles. You're a machine, a well-oiled reed mat sleeping barley mash fueled machine. And now, Sparta gives you your most dangerous assignment yet. You are going to be invisible. Literally. This phase of the agoge is called the cryptaya, and no one explains it. You are simply told to disappear after sunset. No questions, no instructions. You and a few others, older boys all grim-faced, slip into the hills with daggers and dark cloaks. You've trained for this. You know how to walk silently, how to breathe without fogging the night air, how to watch without being seen. And your target. That's where things get murky. Historians still argue what exactly the cryptaya was. Some believe it was a surveillance corps young Spartans spying on the Helot population. Others think it was far darker, a state-sanctioned death squad meant to instill fear and suppress rebellion. You aren't told which version you're part of. You're just told not to come back until you've proven something. So you spend nights crawling through fields, watching fires flicker in Helot huts, listening to whispers you don't understand. You return with reports, grain stores here, suspicious movements there. Sometimes you return with blood on your tunic. No one asks why, no one dares. Here's your first quirky detail. The cryptaya was considered a rite of passage, and participation in it was often unspoken. You didn't boast about it. You didn't describe it. You just endured it. Second fringe fact. Some ancient accounts say boys in the cryptaya had to survive without food or shelter for weeks, subsisting on what they could steal or forage. The goal wasn't success. It was self-sufficiency and absolute isolation. You return after 10 days thinner, dirtier, and oddly quieter. Not because you're traumatized, though perhaps you are, but because something inside you has clicked into place. This isn't just training anymore. This is becoming. Your messmates greet you with nods and small offerings, a dried fig, a strip of cloth to rewrap your blistered foot. No one asks questions. That's the rule. You lie down that night on your mat, unsure how to process what you've just done, or what it means. The trainers say nothing. They move on to shield drills the next morning as if nothing happened. But something has changed. In you, around you. You walk differently now. You carry yourself like stone, heavy, solid, unmoved. And Sparta notices. A trainer begins calling you by name now, not just by unit. Another asks you to lead the evening recitation. A third gives you a nod that lasts half the second too long. You're not praised, this isn't Athens, but you're recognized. That's more dangerous than it sounds. Because in Sparta, recognition means expectation. You're expected to be stronger, louder, quieter, more decisive, more humble, all at once. You rise to it. You don't smile. But inside you feel that the old you is gone. In his place stands a Spartan, but not yet a citizen. That will take more time, more proving. For now you train. Today's lesson is spear discipline. You're partnered with a boy you once beat bloody during a sparring session months ago. Neither of you speaks of it. That's the rule. You drill together synchronized, efficient, relentless. You're not friends. You're more than that. You're combat mirrors. And tonight you eat your barley mash in silence, listening to the scrape of wooden bowls and the quiet sound of someone reciting a line of Tertius under his breath. Glorious is he who dies in front ranks with heart firm and unshaken. You don't even blink anymore, those words. You just feel your heart beating slower, stronger like a war drum at rest. 17. Not quite a man, not quite a boy. Your hands are calloused. Your voice is low. You can now lift more than your body weight, run for hours without rest, and navigate the hills around Sparta with your eyes half closed. You know how to kill with a stick, a rock, or bare fingers, though no one says so out loud. And still you're waiting, because full citizenship doesn't arrive with muscles or age. It arrives with judgment. The elders are watching now, not obviously. You don't see them scribbling on parchment or nodding in approval, but you feel it. A longer glance here, a summoned report there. They're evaluating not just how you fight, but how you walk, speak, think. You're being measured for your place in Sparta's future, which is ironic because you've only just begun remembering you have one. Until recently, the days bled together. Food drills, black broth bruises repeat. But now you begin to notice the city again, the rhythms of the market, the subtle shifts in the seasons, the different ways the wind carries the smell of the river. You're awakening, and that's dangerous. Today you're pulled aside by a former trainer. He doesn't shout, doesn't lecture. He simply walks with you, past the mess hall, past the olive grove, toward the city's edge. He asks what you've learned, not in combat, but in silence. You don't speak for a while, then softly you say, "How to listen." He nods, and then says nothing else. It's the longest conversation you've had in months. That night, the mess serves a new stew, more herbs, maybe a little meat. It's still gray and slightly gritty, but it's different. The boys notice. No one comments, but someone mutters feast under their breath, and the whole table suppresses laughter. Here's your first quirky tidbit. The Spartan diet was famously simple, but elders would occasionally allow treats like rabbit stew or wild greens during festivals. Rewards that came rarely and vanished quickly. Second fringe detail. Spartan boys were sometimes sent to live in the wilderness for months as a final test, relying only on stealth scavenging and sheer stubbornness. You haven't been sent yet, but whispers say it's coming. And this time, there may be real danger. Wolves, perhaps, or worse, helots who've had enough. You think of that. You think of how little you know about the helots, those enslaved by Sparta, working the fields, enduring the state's whims. You've only seen them from afar, hunched in olive groves or trailing behind oxen. You've been taught to view them as a kind of natural force, ever-present, faceless, necessary. But lately you wonder what they're taught about you. Historians still argue whether the Spartan fear of helot rebellion was justified or exaggerated. Some say the helots vastly outnumbered their Spartan masters. Others claim their submission was routine and ritualized. Either way, their silence is louder than you expected. And now late at night, as you lie on your mat and stare at the ceiling beams, you begin to imagine more than just drills and shields. You imagine walking out of Sparta, just walking east-west wherever the dirt path leads. No permission, no escort, just you and the wild. It's not that you want to leave. You just want to know if you could. You don't share this with your messmates. That would be suicide social, if not literal. But you begin to carve these thoughts into your mind like etchings in wood. Small private notches, your secret rebellion. The next day you train as usual. You fight as usual. You laugh quietly at dinner. You pass your inspections. You are in every visible way a model Spartan. But something has shifted, just slightly. And one evening after drills, the boy you once sparred with, the tall one, quiet, efficient, catches your eye. He says nothing but walks beside you for a while. Then in the low dusk light, he says, "Ever wonder what's past the mountains?" You don't answer right away. But eventually you nod. Two Spartans, two machines, beginning to remember they are also boys. By 18, you've mastered the art of appearing invulnerable. Your face is a stone. Your steps are measured. Your body, sculpted through years of hunger pain and endless drills, moves with a calm born not from confidence but from repetition. You aren't fearless. You've simply run out of places to store the fear. Today begins like most with the silent wake up, a splash of cold water to the face and the sour scent of barley in your nose. But by midday, things are different. You're summoned. Not with a flourish, just a name called bluntly from a list. You follow a trainer into the city's heart, away from the training fields, past the agora where the old men sit and talk about glory, past the shrines where women whisper prayers to Artemis, hoping their sons survive the agoj, and then into a quiet courtyard. You're told to stand still. There, in a semicircle of shadows, sit 5 elders, gray-haired, expressionless hands folded neatly in their laps. This is the scrutiny, a private assessment of your fitness to continue towards citizenship. They don't test your muscles. They test your mind. One asks what courage is. You answer simply enduring pain without flinching. Another asks what Sparta means to you. You pause. Then say everything and also nothing without me in it. A third elder narrows his eyes. He asks about your Kryptia nights. You say little, only what's allowed. Enough to prove loyalty, not enough to reveal uncertainty. Historians still debate whether these evaluations were formalized or instinctive. Some say boys were judged based on a single answer. Others say their entire adolescence was weighed like bronze on a scale. Either way, you're dismissed without comment. That's either very good or very bad. You walk back in silence. But you notice something. As you pass a group of younger boys in tunics too long for their legs, they glance at you differently. Not as a fellow trainee, as something else. A shadow of their future? Later that day, you return to your mess group. The stew is watery, but there's wild garlic in it. A gift from someone's older brother recently returned from campaign. That's another shift you've begun to feel. War is no longer abstract. The elders speak of border skirmishes more often. There's talk of Argos stirring again. Rumors that Athens is whispering to Sparta's enemies. You don't know details, but you understand this much. Sparta is always preparing. You're preparing too. Tomorrow you begin advanced phalanx formation learning. Not just how to hold a line, but how to lead one. The trainers now call on you to demonstrate moves to correct others. It's not praise, it's pressure. You accept it. Because whether you pass the scrutiny or not, you are being watched. Here's your first quirky tidbit. Spartans train to keep their shields perfectly level, not for aesthetic reasons, but because the man to your left relied on your shield to protect half his body. A single sagging arm could unravel the entire line. Second fringe fact, Spartan shields were so heavy and curved that boys would practice by balancing them on their forearms while walking uphill barefoot. Uphill both ways, probably just to prove a point. Your arms ache tonight from drills, but you lie awake anyway. You think of your family, your mother most of all. She would have received word by now that you're nearly through the agog. If she's proud, she won't say it. If she's worried, she'll pray harder. You wonder if she's planning your Syssitia placement, the dining club you'll join if you're accepted as a citizen. It's a great honor, but also an obligation. Once you're in a Syssitia, you eat with them for life. You fight beside them. You die beside them. And you must bring food contributions regularly. which means even Spartans, for all their war talk and stoicism, still rely on logistics and barley harvests like the rest of the world. A thought hits you then quiet and sharp. Is this all there is? Train, obey, eat gray soup, march to war, repeat. You try to shake it, but it lingers. Even as your messmates drift to sleep, even as the fire crackles low, even as the wind outside whispers through the stone archways. Is this what you've become? Is this all Sparta allows? You close your eyes, and for the first time in years, you dream of nothing. You're 19 now, and the agage is almost behind you. Almost. There is no graduation ceremony, no laurel wreath placed on your brow, no thunderous applause, only the slow erosion of oversight. One day you're being shouted at for the angle of your shield. The next, you're the one correcting a younger boy's grip. You've become the voice you used to fear. But just because the trainers shout less doesn't mean life is easier. In many ways, it's harder, because now you're stepping into the space where mistakes carry consequences, not measured in bruises, but in death or disgrace. Today, you're issued real weapons. Not training sticks, not dulled blades, actual iron sharp, dark cold. The weight feels familiar, but also sobering. This isn't pretend anymore. And with that comes your final trial before citizenship full phalanx simulation. You're assigned a command position not at the center but close. You're to lead a wedge formation into a mock enemy line. The exercise takes place in the open hills at dawn with instructors watching from every angle like perched vultures. The dust kicks up early. Your sandals dig into dry, splintering soil. Your shield rattles with each step, but your grip is sure. The boy beside you, a friend since you were 12, gives a slight nod. It's not encouragement, it's a pact. And then contact. The crash of shields, the grunt of lungs expelling air, the sickening slap of body against body. Spears tap breastplates gently by design, but you feel the force of every blow. You press forward, keep the line. You don't think, you become the phalanx. When it's over, you're sweating, bleeding slightly from a split knuckle, and your tunic is torn. But your formation held. You didn't flinch, you didn't break rank. And later one of the elders murmurs your name in passing. Not with praise, just acknowledgement. But in Sparta, that's as close to pride as you'll ever get. Here's your first quirky fact. Some sources claim the Spartans trained to move in silence. No war cries, no chants. Just a wall of bronze and discipline moving across the battlefield like a tidal wave with excellent core strength. Second fringe detail, Spartan soldiers sometimes used rhythm and music to stay in sync during marches. Drummers weren't just aesthetic, they were essential to maintaining unity. Even in war, timing mattered more than volume. And now for the first time you're allowed to walk freely through the agora during daylight without a trainer trailing behind you. No barked instructions, no assignments, just you in the city. You see people differently now. The women gathering water glance your way, not as a boy but as something else. A possible citizen, a warrior, a future. You don't meet their eyes for long. That's not the Spartan way. But you notice the difference. Your mother appears at evening with a bundle of figs. She doesn't speak much. She brushes your shoulder with her hand just once. You feel it for hours after she's gone. She's proud. She doesn't say so, of course, but you can tell. You eat the figs, slowly sharing them with your messmates without being asked. It's an unspoken rule in Sparta, gifts are shared. Hoarding is weakness. Generosity is strength. You think of the first time you met these boys. Barefoot, skinny, terrified. Now they're broad-shouldered, scarred, grim-faced young men. You've bled with them, sparred with them, mourned with them. Some didn't make it. Some quietly disappeared from the dormitory, never to return. No one talks about those boys. You still remember their faces. Tonight around the hearth, someone tells a story. It's about a Spartan who wrestled a boar with his bare hands. Probably false, but it gets a laugh. You smile without meaning to. The fire crackles, the smoke coils upward, and for a brief moment, you're not thinking about drills or injuries or strategy. You're just alive, warm, full, home. Your eyelids grow heavy as you lie back on your mat, the scent of fig still on your fingers, and you realize you're not waiting anymore. You're ready. Your feet hurt again. It's a dull, persistent ache now somewhere in the middle of your arches rising through your shins. The kind of ache that doesn't scream but hums. And still you run. At 19, you're at the peak of your physical ability. Every muscle does what is told. Your lungs fill evenly. You can jump, strike, twist, and recover faster than you ever could as a child. You barely remember what it was like to move clumsily. But now comes the hardest test of all, standing still. You've entered the phase of your training where everything depends on control. Not endurance, not strength, not even aggression, but absolute poise. You practice formation drills so slow they feel like time has reversed. You're told to march one step every 10 seconds. No shuffling, no fidgeting, no eye movements. A twitch is punished with another round. And when you stand in line, you don't just hold your shield, you become part of the wall. You realize in a cold moment of clarity that Spartan warfare isn't about chaos. It's about order applied violently. That's what makes a Spartan line so terrifying. It doesn't break, it doesn't scream, it just advances. Today, a group of visiting Athenian diplomats observes your drills. They wear robes that shimmer. One of them carries a scroll, another wears sandals that clearly haven't touched dirt in a while. You and the other trainees pretend not to notice. But the trainers are sharper meaner. You're being displayed, the Athenians murmur. One nods at your precision. You hear the word automatons whispered, not entirely with admiration. Historians still argue whether Sparta's obsession with uniformity came from practicality or ideology. Some believe it was pure military necessity. Others argue it was a response to Sparta's extreme minority status, a small ruling class atop a massive enslaved population clinging to control through enforced sameness. That sameness, however, does not extend to the mind, at least not fully, because lately your thoughts have become inconvenient. Last night, during a rare moment of rest beneath the stars, you caught yourself wondering what it would be like to paint something. You have no experience, no talent probably, but still the thought came. To paint a spear resting against a wall, a sleeping boy curled in a cloak, a fig sliced open. You said nothing, of course, but you remembered it, carefully. Here's a fringe detail some Spartans did paint, especially women whose education was more varied than many assume. Music, poetry, dance, and even fresco art existed in Sparta, just in private. Another oddity wealthy Spartan families would sometimes own elaborate mirrors and carved jewelry boxes. Frills in a city of stone, but real. The contradiction becomes harder to ignore. You are trained to be a beast of war, and yet Sparta itself is full of beauty. Olive groves, mountain ridges, red clay rooftops catching sunset light. No one talks about this, but everyone sees it. Tonight, a fellow trainee passes you half a fig. Quietly, no words, just a gift. He saw how long your drills lasted, how your wrist trembled after your 10th spear throw. You accept it, you eat it slowly, and for a moment you're not a soldier, you're just a person. Sitting in the warm dark, tasting something sweet. Then the trainer's shadow crosses the threshold and everyone stiffens. Tomorrow you'll begin shield formations in full armor. Real bronze, real weight, not practice gear. It's your final tier of training, and if you pass you'll be placed in a permanent phalanx unit, with real men, with real blades. No more wooden swords, no more theory. War is no longer a story told by elders. It's a place you're being asked to enter. And deep down beneath the stoicism and silence and blood-hardened muscles, you're scared. Not of death, but of becoming someone who doesn't feel fear anymore. You lie down with that thought still rattling in your head. Outside, a dog barks in the hills, a low wind moves through the reeds, and someone 2 mats over is quietly crying in their sleep. You don't turn to look, but you listen, and you remember the sound, because tomorrow you may not be able to. It's official now. You're a Spartan adult, though adult here doesn't mean lounging in a robe with olives and poetry. It means you're now allowed to die on behalf of the state, and more importantly, to marry. But let's be honest, in Sparta, marriage is about as romantic as a blunt axe. You're 20 years old. Your training is finished, your body is stronger than ever, and your mind, well, your mind is quieter now. Not empty, just used to the rules. You still live with your messmates, still eat your dinners in the Sisysha, still show up for formation every morning before the sun dares peek over the mountains. But now you're a part of the machine, and soon you'll be asked to help make more Spartans. Marriage here isn't like in other cities. You don't propose. You're matched, quietly, strategically, sometimes with a wink from your mother or a nudge from your commander. Your wife may be older, she's likely stronger than you. Spartan women are raised on the same ideals of toughness, minus the black broth and beatings. But here's the twist. Once you're married, you don't move in together. Not yet. Instead, you sneak out at night under cover of dark to visit your wife in secret. You whisper through doorways. You slip under cloaks. You meet in shadows. The idea supposedly is that longing sharpens love. Historians still argue whether this ritual was about discipline, population control, or just really dramatic romantic flair. One story even claims it helped keep warriors focused during peacetime. You're not sure what to think. But sneaking around makes you feel like a teenager again, which is ironic because you've only just stopped being one. Here's your first quirky tidbit. Some young Spartan husbands reportedly went years without ever seeing their wives in daylight. This wasn't just accepted, it was encouraged. Second fringe fact. Women in Sparta could own land, which made them some of the most economically powerful women in the ancient world. So if your wife doesn't like you, she can make your life extremely inconvenient. You meet her for the first time behind a stone wall near the vineyards. She's calm, quiet. Her eyes are sharper than yours. She doesn't bow her head. Instead, she says, "You smell like smoke and onions." And you think I could love this person. Over the next few weeks, you learn how to be married without being present. You bring small things: an extra cloak, a better knife, a rare piece of cheese from your mess. In return, she teaches you how to speak again. Not in commands, not in slogans, but in sentences. The words feel strange in your mouth. You ask her what she remembers from her own training. She says mostly just how much boys shouted. And that makes you laugh, actually laugh. Not the grunted, shoulder-hunched mess hall kind. A real one. You hadn't realized how long it's been. But the duties don't pause. You're now expected to train others. Younger boys look at you the way you once looked at your trainers, with equal parts fear and fascination. And now you understand the burden. Because training someone isn't about screaming. It's about shaping. You catch yourself mimicking the quiet trainer from your youth, the one who asked what courage meant. You use silence more than shouting. You let the boys feel their mistakes before correcting them. They watch you closely. And you start to recognize the ones who will rise and the ones who will break. It weighs on you more than you expect. Sparta doesn't talk about failure, but you begin to see it: cracks in armor, flinches in drills' eyes that dart away when discipline arrives. You remember those feelings. You survived them. But not everyone does. And Sparta isn't sentimental. Tonight, you sit with your messmates, sharing figs and dried meat. One of them, Timon, always the loudest, leans in and says, "You ever think about what comes after?" You blink. He means war, of course. Your unit is close to deployment. A skirmish on the western border has turned ugly. You'll likely be sent soon. No, you say. And that's mostly true. Because thinking too far ahead in Sparta is like asking the sea not to be wet. You lie awake longer than usual tonight. The stars are bright. The moon is full. Somewhere down the hillside, you think you hear a lyre playing a woman's fingers, dancing over strings notes rising like smoke into the sky. You don't know if it's real or not, but you listen anyway. You wake before dawn, heart thudding, palms already sweating. It's not a nightmare. It's not even fear. It's anticipation, the kind that tightens in your stomach like a pulled drawstring. Today, your unit marches to the border. Not for practice, not for drills, for deployment. You've never been this far from Sparta. Until now, your world has been 10 square miles of dust-stone barley bruises and duty. Beyond that, rumors, maps, and warnings. You dress quickly, methodically, almost reverently. Each strap of leather, each bronze plate fitted over your tunic feels heavier than usual. Not because of the weight, but because now everything matters. Your mother gave you a small talisman when you were 6, a simple carved bone figure of Artemis, goddess of the hunt. You carry it today hidden in your belt, just in case. You're not superstitious exactly, but let's not tempt the fates. Your commander, a tall man with gray eyes and a nose that looks permanently broken, gives the signal. Your unit assembles in phalanx formation. Shields up, spears level, 32 warriors in perfect order. You begin to march. And though you've marched thousands of times before, today the earth feels different. Every step carries consequences. You pass through hills you've only seen from a distance, down into valleys that hum with insects and smells that aren't burnt grain for once. You see olive groves that belong to someone else, distant fires, goat herds who look away as you pass. Sparta, it turns out, is not the center of the world, just its strangest fortress. The terrain grows rougher. Your boots catch on twisted roots. Your arms ache from holding your shield steady, but you don't falter, none of you do, because now you are what Sparta always intended, a living wall of bronze and willpower. You reach the outer village by late afternoon. It's small, half-empty, and tense. Children peer out from behind doors. A farmer bows barely. You recognize the signs, fear mixed with necessity. These are your allies. For now, you camp near the river that night. No fires allowed, no songs, just oiling of weapons and whispered reviews of tactics. Here's your first quirky tidbit. Spartans were trained to sleep in full gear minus their helmets with their spears in reach and sandals on. No bedtime stories here, just pressure points on rocky ground and a prayer you don't roll onto your own dagger. Second fringe detail. Some units were known to chew specific herbs before battle, possibly silphium or something. Similar to dull pain and nerves, not officially approved, but tradition has its secrets. You chew a bit of bitter root one of the older men gives you. It tastes like regret and vinegar, but your heartbeat evens out. Slightly. The next morning you're woken by silence, not a shout, not a horn, just a hand on your shoulder and the look that says now. Your unit moves before the sun is high. You cross a low ridge and see the valley spread before you. On the far edge, dust rises. Enemies. They aren't organized, just scattered. Raiders, maybe. Argive remnants. It doesn't matter. They are the reason Sparta exists. Your commander gives the hand signal. You lock shields. Everything shrinks to a tunnel, the leather rim of your shield, the sweaty backs of your comrades, the point of your spear aimed just above the shoulder line. And then you move. There's no battle cry, no thundering charge, just a press like a tide coming in slow. Cold, unstoppable. The clash when it comes is not cinematic. It's sweaty, confusing, loud. You jab, deflect, advance. The enemy screams, breaks, tries to scatter, but the phalanx doesn't chase. It consumes. Your spear finds contact. You feel the resistance of flesh, the crunch of something harder. You don't stop, not until your commander calls the halt. Afterward, the field is a mess of footprints, blood-broken weapons, and a few moans that fade before help can arrive. You don't speak. None of you do. You clean your spear, you check your shield, you count your messmates. All there. For now. That night, no one sleeps easily. Not from fear, from adrenaline. You sit with your back against a tree, eyes open, fingers twitching now and then. You think about what just happened, and more disturbingly, what didn't happen. You didn't hesitate. You didn't cry. You just did what you were trained to do. And you wonder quietly, privately, without telling a soul what part of you stayed on that field. When you return to Sparta, no one claps. No feast, no parade, no laurel crown. You walk through the city gates covered in dust bruises and the iron tang of dried sweat, and the only acknowledgement is a single nod from a man sweeping the steps of the temple. This is how Sparta rewards survival with indifference. And honestly, it's a relief. You reunite with your messmates at the Syssitia that night. The stew is the same. The benches are as hard as ever. Someone passes you a slice of dried cheese without a word, and someone else mutters about sore shoulders. That's about as emotional as it gets. Still, something's changed. Your group eats slower now, more deliberately. No rushing, no glancing around. You chew, you breathe, you listen. You've all seen the edge, and once you've been to the edge, everything gets quieter. Later that week, you're called to the temple precinct. Not for punishment, for ceremony. You're being officially registered into the adult citizen class, the homaioi, the equals. That doesn't mean equal in skill or mind, of course, just equal in obligation. You are now quite literally Sparta. It's not a loud ritual, just an oath recited in a voice that barely rises over the rustle of the wind. You swear to fight for Sparta, to uphold its laws, to live with honor, and to die without fear. Everyone says the same words, but inside the meanings differ. You say them with a full chest and a clenched stomach. You are now eligible to vote, though the issues are limited. You can hold office, though only a few do. And you're officially allowed to own land, though in practice most property is still managed by families and women. Here's a curious twist: while Spartan men were trained as warriors, Spartan women managed the economy. They supervised estates, arranged marriages, and ensured the social order didn't unravel, while the men marched in tidy lines toward possible death. Historians still argue whether this balance made Sparta more progressive or just differently oppressive. But it worked for a while. Here's your first quirky tidbit. Sparta had virtually no walls. The philosopher Xenophon claimed that the Spartans believed their men were the city's walls. And you've become a brick in that terrifying wall of silence. Second fringe fact: some Spartans were sent as mercenaries to other Greek cities. Highly prized, always stoic, and generally considered the most unfun guests at dinner parties. You aren't sent away, not yet. But you begin to see the larger gears turning. You're assigned to a new phalanx unit. Real veterans this time. Men with scars older than your memory. They don't talk much, but their glances weigh more than any insult. You learn quickly. You're still allowed, expected, even to train every morning. The drills don't change. But your mindset does. Now you're not just perfecting your form. You're transmitting it. You begin assisting in the agage. Younger boys now see you as the distant, terrifying adult you once resented. You teach them how to hold a spear properly, how to keep their eyes forward even when blood trickles into them, how to fall and rise without a sound. You don't offer comfort. That's not your role. But occasionally when a boy's ankle buckles or his voice breaks mid-chant, you catch yourself standing a little closer. Just enough for them to feel it. Not support, just presence. And at night you return to your wife. Still in secret, still brief, but more familiar now. She tells you of the harvest of a new horse born to one of her cousins. She recites a line of poetry she overheard from a merchant's son, and you find yourself repeating it the next morning quietly under your breath during drills. Something's shifting. You're becoming a citizen, but you're also becoming yourself again. A strange thing happens around this time. Your dreams return. Not nightmares, just dreams. Sometimes you see yourself walking through fog alone barefoot. Sometimes you dream of fig trees heavy with fruit. Sometimes you dream of laughing, really laughing with no one watching, or it feels like parts of your mind are waking up after years of marching. You don't tell anyone, of course. But one night, as your unit sharpens their weapons in the starlight, one of the older men, a broad shouldered veteran with a nose like a cliff face, leans toward you and says, "You'll be fine when the next war comes." Then he adds almost absently, "You remember how to feel. That's harder to keep than a shield." You blink, but he says no more. And neither do you. Because in Sparta, words are rare tools, and you've just learned one more way to use them. You begin to understand the rhythm of Spartan adulthood, not through the moments of violence, but through the long, quiet stretches between them. It's not a sprint. It's a slow grind, an endurance test of the soul. There's the dawn formation, the midday training, the muted Syssitia dinners, the patrols, the watching. Always watching for enemies, for helots, for cracks in the machine. And somehow among it all you live. You continue your visits to your wife no longer fumbling or shy. There's a strange comfort in the routine now. She talks more. You talk more. One night she hands you a folded piece of cloth a baby's wrap, unfinished but soft and warm. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't have to. You hold it for a long time. Children in Sparta aren't born into comfort. They're examined. If the elders find them lacking too weak, too sickly, they're taken away. No names, no mourning. Just a decision, cold and swift. You try not to think about it, but it simmers beneath everything. Historians still argue whether the stories of infanticide were as widespread as reported. Some say they were exaggerated by outsiders like Plutarch, looking to paint Sparta as brutal. Others claim they were real but rare, not casual. Either way, the fear is real. So you do what Spartans do best, you bury it. You keep your boots polished, your shield polished, your expression polished. But every so often you slip. The other day, while correcting a boy's grip during spear drill, you caught yourself smiling. Smiling when he finally got it right. He looked at you with wide eyes, surprised that praise could exist in this city. You grunted and walked away, but he smiled back. Here's your first quirky tidbit: Spartan boys could earn a single red cloak for excellence in training. It was the closest thing to a gold star in your world. Many warriors wore them into battle, not for protection, for pride. Second fringe fact: Spartans didn't write much down. Literacy existed, but it wasn't prized. Memory was sacred. If you couldn't carry knowledge in your head, you weren't worthy of it. That's why you now remember entire speeches from your trainers. Their words, their pacing, even the way their voices rose and fell. You could recite it all in your sleep. And sometimes you do. Your dreams are no longer just fig trees and fog. Sometimes they're your childhood again, running barefoot across cold stone, hiding stolen cheese beneath your tunic, the feel of a bruise blossoming on your thigh after a too sharp kick. And sometimes there are the faces of boys you trained with who aren't around anymore. One slipped in the mountains during a wilderness test. One simply vanished after a failed Cryptia mission. No one said their names, no one asked, but you remember. Not because you're soft, but because you're Spartan. And Spartans don't forget. Lately, you're asked to attend more assemblies. Not to speak, just to observe. You stand near the edge of the Apella, the Citizens' Council, where older men argue over grain helot quotas and the city's alliances. You don't understand every word, but you catch the shape of things. Sparta is changing. The world beyond is growing louder. Athens is rising and its influence is spilling over the mountains. Persia still looms. There are whispers of colonies of more land of wars yet to be named. And you are both sword and scale in that balance. One evening, a traveler passes through an Ionian poet with a cracked lyre and too many stories. He sings at the edge of the marketplace, watched by children and a few curious elders. You pause, just for a moment, and listen. His song isn't about Sparta, it's about a fisherman who lost his boat and found the stars instead. Soft, strange, useless probably, but beautiful. You find yourself humming it days later during spear drills. A messmate notices, doesn't say anything, but taps your shield with his elbow. That's enough. You still belong here. You're still part of the wall. But somewhere beneath the layers of bronze and training and duty, you've become something else too. A man with a wife. A man with a memory. A man who sometimes hums. And in Sparta, that's almost a rebellion. You are 30 now. In Sparta, that means you've passed into a new layer of adulthood, a slower burning fire. Not a sprinting warrior anymore, but not retired either. Just settled. You're still in the phalanx, still train, still march, but now younger men defer to you. Not because you shout, but because your presence speaks louder. When you adjust your spear grip, 3 others do the same. When you pause to tie your sandal tighter, others wait without a word. You've become the standard. Your face carries scars now, not just from battle, but from the steady erosion of time. One across your eyebrow from a skirmish near Tegea, one at your temple from a falling training dummy which you will never admit, and one hidden quiet, deep beneath the surface, the weariness that no trainer prepared you for. Because the hardest part of Spartan life isn't war, it's the space in between. No one talks about it, but everyone knows. The long stretches of peace are full of duties, inspections, endurance. You drill, you patrol, you vote, you mentor, over and over. No new glory, no new songs, just bronze on skin and silence. And that's when your mind starts to whisper, what else is there? You catch yourself looking out across the Eurotas River one evening, watching reeds shiver in the breeze, wondering just for a heartbeat if it's possible to fish without guilt, or garden, or even sit, really sit, with your back against a tree, no spear nearby. Historians still debate whether Sparta's strictness was more performative than practical. Some say there were secret moments of joy, hidden gardens, hushed love songs, festivals behind closed doors. Others argue it was discipline all the way down. Maybe it's both. Because tonight you attend a festival. Yes, Sparta has festivals. Few. Odd, surprisingly intense. This one celebrates Artemis Orthia, and it includes the famous whipping ritual young boys flogged before the altar to test endurance. You wince a little, remembering your turn. The memory still stings. Literally. But something else happens too. After the ceremony, there's a dance. Not elegant, not Ionian. Something closer to stomping and shouting and synchronized madness. Men whirl, dust rises, elders clap off beat, and for a brief moment, everyone forgets they're Spartans. They're just bodies, moving, laughing, living. A boy runs past you wearing a goat mask, tossing flower petals. You laugh out loud, and no one shames you. Here's your first quirky tidbit Sparta had songs. Lots of them. Often about war, yes, but also about wine animals' weather and goats doing inappropriate things. You're not supposed to laugh, but you do anyway. Second fringe fact. Spartan men sometimes wore wreaths of celery at parties. Why celery, no one knows. Probably because laurels were taken and parsley was too slippery. You leave the festival at midnight, flower petal still stuck to your shoulder. Your wife is waiting. She doesn't ask about the ceremony. She hands you a piece of honeyed bread and says, "You still walk like a boy pretending to be a man." You grin. "You still talk like a woman who owns more land than me." She raises an eyebrow. "That's because I do. This is your new rhythm. A little war, a little quiet, a lot of ritual, the occasional whispered joke. Sometimes you see boys in the agogs that remind you of yourself. You pause by the training fields just to watch. One trips, one winces. One stares so hard at a spear that it might catch fire. You don't interfere. You just stand there, arms folded until they notice, then walk away. It's enough. You've learned by now that being seen is a kind of mentorship. One evening, a younger soldier, barely 20, asks you how to stay calm in formation. You think for a long moment, then say, breathe through your feet. He stares confused, then grins, then walks away. He'll figure it out. And if not, he'll come back, or he won't. That's Sparta. Tonight you sit by the hearth. The coals glow red. The air smells like thyme and dust. Your knees crack when you stand now, and your spear grip takes a second longer to firm up. But you're still here. Still standing. Still watching. Still you. You are 35 and Sparta still owns you. But these days you feel the city's grip loosening just slightly, like a strap on a shield that's been worn so long it no longer cuts into your wrist. Still present, still tight, but familiar now. Your steps are slower not from weakness but from a new kind of awareness. You don't rush. Not through the streets, not through meals, and certainly not through decisions. In Sparta, rushing is for the untested. You are long since tested. Your wife, yes, still formidable, now speaks to you plainly without code or edge. She tells you when she's displeased, tells you when your jokes are lazy, and sometimes rarely she tells you when she's afraid. That honesty in a city built on silence feels almost revolutionary. She tells you she wants another child. You pause. You say yes, and then you wonder if you meant it. Spartan children are born into expectation, not ease. You know the training. You were the training. You know the pain, the cold, the fear, and still you help her prepare quietly, efficiently, like you're dressing for war again. Historians still debate how involved Spartan men really were in family life. Some argue you were barely present, more ghost than father. Others say older warriors, especially those with peacetime duties, played active protective roles at home. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. You don't cradle the infant like an Athenian would. But you stand watch. You sharpen the knife. You nod once when your wife says, "This one will be strong." And you believe her? Here's your first quirky tidbit. Spartans celebrated baby naming ceremonies on the 7th or 10th day, unlike other Greek cities that did it earlier. Delay was tradition, and perhaps a quiet test. Second fringe fact, Spartan lullabies weren't about sheep or moons. They were about shields, mountains, wolves. A child's first song might well be a war chant whispered softly. You begin to hum them again, without meaning to. Your own child. Your son, as it turns out, is a squirming, furious little thing with fists always clenched. You catch yourself watching his fingers, his jaw, the way his legs kick when he's startled. You wonder if he dreams yet. And if so, of what? Outside the home, your life flows in its pattern. You attend council. You train, you teach. You correct younger warriors whose sandals are too loose, whose grips are too tight. You don't raise your voice anymore. You don't have to. Your silence speaks volumes now. One morning during inspection, a boy drops his shield. It lands hard, ringing like a cracked bell. Everyone freezes. You walk over, lift it, hand it back. Say quietly, "Don't drop it again." That boy will remember you for the rest of his life. Because Spartan correction isn't about shame. It's about memory. Your own memories start to crowd closer these days. You remember boys who didn't make it, friends who vanished, names you haven't spoken aloud in decades. Sometimes while oiling your armor, you catch a glimpse of your own reflection and think, "I've become them." And then, who will become me? Because that's the real legacy of Sparta. Not monuments, not poetry, but a continuity. Every generation molding the next like bronze poured into the same old mold, chipped, dented, but still usable. You still report for phalanx duty when called. But it's rarer now. You're mostly stationed within the city, an anchor, not a spearhead. You walk the perimeter. You inspect walls, market weights, training fields, and sometimes on very quiet evenings you just sit. Not meditate, not strategize, just sit. There's a spot near the edge of the Ago's yard beneath the cypress tree where the breeze comes in from the hills. You sit there alone watching the sky change color, listening to the distant thud of wooden swords. And for a few minutes each week, you don't think about Sparta. You just think, one of your oldest messmates dies this year. Not in battle illness of all things. You carry his body to the cremation pyre with 7 others. No crying, just fire ash and the smell of smoke clinging to your cloak. He was 62, laughed too much, always hummed the same off-key war tune during inspections. You hated it. You miss it. That night at dinner, someone hums it under their breath. You don't correct them. You nod. That's how grief looks here. Tiny, almost invisible, like cracks in marble. You think about your son again. He toddles now, fierce, loud, constantly falling. You watch from a doorway as he tumbles into a clay jar, shouts angrily at it, then tries again. You recognize that face. It's yours. And suddenly you are deeply afraid. Not of war, not of death, but that one day your son might stand where you are now, weathered, heavy, full of things unsaid. And he might forget the fig trees, or the dance, or the way a mother's laugh once echoed off a courtyard wall. You close your eyes, and you remember it all just in case. Because in Sparta, memory is resistance. And sometimes resistance is the only softness you're allowed. It happens one morning without warning. You bend to pick up a dropped spear during a training session, and something in your back says no. Not loudly, not sharply. Just a quiet resistance, like a child tugging your tunic and whispering, "We're not doing this anymore." You straighten slowly, too slowly. And that's how you know you are no longer young. It doesn't stop you, of course. You still train, still lead, still swing the sword and adjust the line. But everything takes longer, recovery especially. What used to be a sore shoulder is now a week-long negotiation with your entire upper body. You tell no one, not because you're ashamed, but because Sparta doesn't have a word for retirement. There's no grand ceremony when your name quietly drops from the active rolls. No feast, no speech, just fewer summons, more sitting, a different kind of watching. You begin walking the perimeter of the city alone in the mornings, not for duty, for rhythm. Your body still needs movement, demands it really, but your limbs now set the pace, not your pride. The city looks different at this speed. You notice more now the chipped tiles on the temple steps, the way ivy curls around the public fountain. The broken fence near the Helot quarters, someone's tried to fix with rope. The sounds of Sparta change too. You start hearing things beneath the noise. The rhythm of laundry slapping stone. The cadence of a mother scolding her child in song. The heavy breath of a dog napping too close to the forge. The world didn't get louder. You just got quieter. Historians still debate how old Spartans lived out their later years. Some claim they remained active in public life, sitting on the Gerousia, the Council of Elders. Others think many simply faded into the background, living quietly among family, observing, guiding, remembering. You do a bit of both. Your name comes up now and then at meetings. Younger men quote you. Not directly, but you catch phrases, echoes, bits of your old commands woven into their new ones. It's oddly flattering and slightly terrifying. You begin mentoring more deliberately. You take on a single youth, gangly, quiet, too observant. You see something in him, not brilliance, but endurance. The willingness to stay with the question when everyone else has gone looking for swords. You don't talk much at first. You show. How to wrap sandals without blisters, how to eat enough without getting sluggish, how to balance a spear in one finger to find its true center of gravity. He watches, learns. Then one day he asks, "Did you ever want to leave Sparta?" You don't answer. Not because the question offends you, but because you're still answering it. Here's your first quirky tidbit. Some Spartans did leave. Rare, yes, but it happened. Exiles, diplomats, mercenaries who decided they liked softer food and different laws. Sparta didn't like to talk about them, but they existed. They were called Trisants Tremblers. Second fringe detail. There's a record of a Spartan who, after years abroad, returned and declared his own city too small for his eyes. He wasn't seen again. Probably not a fan favorite. Euthos stay. Not out of duty anymore, out of choice. Because you've begun to see Sparta not just as discipline or training or shields, but as texture. A tapestry woven with silences, stubbornness, small victories, and wild, impossible pride. You spend more time at home now. Your son nearly 10 tests everything. The edge of the table. The limits of his mother's patience. Your silence. He asks about the agog. You say little? Let him draw conclusions from your eyebrows alone. He sneaks your old training spear out one afternoon and tries to fight a pine tree. The tree wins. You don't laugh, not in front of him. But later, while scraping olive pits from a bowl, you do. Just a little. Because the tree will always win. But the boy keeps swinging. You understand now that you were always preparing for this. Not for glory, not for battle, for inheritance. Not property, not land. Memory. You begin telling stories, just a few, just to him, of a boy who couldn't steal cheese without sneezing. Of a commander who snored like a bear wrapped in thunder. Of a secret spot behind the barracks where figs grew wild if you were brave enough to climb barefoot. You don't say the names. He'll add his own. You let him oil your sandals one morning, and he does it wrong terribly. The leather sticks, the strap's too tight. But you say nothing, because one day you'll be gone, and he'll remember your silence as much as your instruction. The shield rack in your home is full now. Too full. Your original shield hangs at the top, worn smooth. Your wife wants to take it down, use the space for olive jars. You nod, eventually, but not today. You sit with her in the courtyard. The breeze is warm. A dog barks in the distance. Your son runs by barefoot, something tied to his back with string. You don't ask what it is. You just watch. And for the first time in years, you feel something rare in Sparta. Stillness. You are 40, and for the first time in your life, Sparta seems smaller. Not weaker, not lesser, just more contained. Like a well-worn sandal molded to your feet, reliable and comforting, but never surprising. You know every corner, every stone, every sound. Even the shadows feel familiar now. And that's when the news arrives. Another war. Not a raid. Not a minor skirmish with Tegea over grain and bruised pride. A real war. The kind with ships, with politics, with history books waiting to be written. Athens is stirring again, louder than ever. Allies are shifting. Borders are blurring. There are rumors of Persian whispers. Corinth leans one way. Thebes leans another. Sparta sharpens its spears. And you're not expected to fight. You're over the usual age. You've served your years. But no one tells you not to. No one in Sparta ever says you're too old. They just wait to see if you show up. So you do. You polish your armor. You check your sword's edge. You pull your old red cloak from the chest, the one with a tear repaired, so long ago you can't remember when it happened. You stand with the phalanx again. And this time you see everything. Not just the formation, not just the weapons, but the little hesitations. The boy chewing the inside of his cheek. The man whispering a prayer behind closed lips. The commander who taps his fingers twice before shouting commands. You see the fear, and you see how carefully everyone hides it. Spartan training never taught you to be fearless. That was the myth. What it taught you was to function through fear, to let it sit quietly in your chest and move anyway. Historians still debate whether Sparta's military success was due to superior tactics or simply relentless unity. Some suggest it was all posturing. Others insist it was genuine. Whatever the truth, the effect was real. Marching in Spartan formation felt like inevitability. You march for 3 days. Your knees ache, your back complains, you don't complain. On the fourth night, camped near a dry riverbed, a younger warrior comes to you. He's your son's age. He looks like he hasn't slept. He says, I don't think I'm ready. You nod. Offer him your water skin. Sit down beside him. Neither was I, you say. The trick is to pretend until it's over. He looks at you like you've just handed him a secret scroll. Maybe you have. That night, you dream again of fig trees, of the agog of the goat mask at the festival, and of a song you don't quite remember, hummed by someone who may no longer be alive. The battle, when it comes, is short, brutal, blindingly loud. Your position is mostly defense. You hold the line. You shout 3 commands. You deflect 2 spears. You break 1 shield. You survive. You count heads. Most are present. You think of your son. You march home. Here's your first quirky tidbit. Spartans didn't celebrate victories with parades. They returned, ate dinner, cleaned their weapons. Maybe if the mood was wild, someone sang quietly. Second fringe fact. Spartan helmets were often passed down generations, but not always for glory. Sometimes it was to save bronze. You realize now that your helmet still dented from the Tegea raid may one day sit on your son's head, if he earns it. You return to Sparta in silence. Again, no feast, no speech. But your wife meets you at the gate. Says nothing, just touches your arm softly. That night you remove your armor more slowly. You wash the dust off your hands. You sit in the courtyard with your son who tells you he wants to join the Agog early. You say you will. You don't say how hard it will be, or how proud you already are. Some things are better left in the silence. You stay up long after everyone else is asleep, watching the stars, listening to the quiet drip of water from the roof gutter into the clay basin. And in that moment, you realize something. You're no longer a soldier pretending to be human. You're a human who was once a soldier. The difference is everything. Because war in Sparta was never the point. Endurance was. Loyalty was. And now, memory is. You are 45 now. Your spear hangs on the wall untouched for weeks. The leather grip is faded, the tip dulled not by battle but by time itself, and you don't mind. Because something in you has shifted. You still attend drills, but as an observer. You still walk the perimeter, but with a younger companion who listens more than he talks. You still correct spear grips, but you do it with a raised eyebrow, not a bark. In Sparta, you become what the young call a living statue, not unkindly. They nod to you, step aside, whisper your name like it's part of the curriculum. You don't crave attention, but you notice it. And part of you, just a sliver, misses the fire. Until one morning, your son, now taller than your shoulder, lean with unspent energy, wakes you before dawn. He's ready. Today he enters the agoge. He kneels as tradition demands, and you place your hand on his shoulder. You look at him the way your father never looked at you directly, with the full weight of what you know. You don't say, be brave. You don't say, don't fail. You say, listen. Because that's the one thing you never truly learned until years too late. He nods, doesn't smile, but his eyes do something close. You watch him walk away into the training yard, into the same dust, the same cold, the same everything you walked into at 7, and something in your chest doesn't break. It expands. Sparta lives again through him. Historians still argue whether the agoge changed over the centuries. Some say it softened, became more ceremonial. Others insist it remained rigid, relentless, unchanging until the very end. But every parent watching a child disappear behind that wooden gate knows whatever's inside it will change them. You return home. Your wife doesn't ask how it went. She knows. Instead, she lights the hearth, makes bread, and sets down 2 cups when she only needs 1. You share them anyway. Here's your first quirky tidbit. Spartans believed in laconic speech, saying only what was necessary. But in private among family, they could be shockingly talkative, especially the women. Spartan wives were famous for both sharp wit and louder voices than their husbands. Second fringe detail. Spartan boys in the Agoge were sometimes required to sing chanting war songs, moral lessons, even silly anthems to instill rhythm obedience and memory. So yes, your son may be shouting lullabies at full volume by sunset. The days stretch now. You begin carving wood, not for purpose, just for shape. A spear tip, a lion's face, a tiny bowl. You don't sign your name. That's not the point. You just shape things. Leave them around the house like forgotten memories. Sometimes someone picks one up, sometimes not. You still attend the appella, but you speak even less now. When you do speak, heads turn. You've learned that silence gives words weight. At one session, a young commander proposes a campaign aggressive, ambitious. The room swells with energy. You raise your hand and say, "What do we lose if we win?" It's not rejection, just perspective. The question floats, sticks lingers, and that's enough. That night you visit the training yard after dark. Your son's cloak hangs by the door. His sandals are muddy. You don't go in, just stand outside the gate listening. Someone grunts. Someone laughs. Someone falls. And for a moment you hear yourself, not your voice, but your echo. All these years later, Sparta still carries you forward. And you finally have learned to let it. You walk home under a sky littered with stars. The stones know your footsteps now. The fig tree near the barracks is still there. You pluck one. It's sweet, a little overripe, just how you like it. And that's when you realize you have spent your life preparing not for battle, but for this. The long dusk, the warm courtyard, the slow fade from warrior to witness. You sit down and a dog curls at your feet. Your wife hums an old tune. Your son snores somewhere in the distance, dreaming of mountains, no doubt. And you feel no need to sleep, because this is the peace you earned. Not by victory, not by power, but by endurance. Sparta asked everything of you, and somehow you gave it. And still have something left. You are 50. No one tells you what it means to grow old in Sparta, mostly because so few do. The city is built for the young, for the swift, for those who can swing a sword while reciting the laws of Lycurgus backwards in the rain. But now the young ask you questions with their eyes before they dare speak. They nod when you pass. They mimic your way of wrapping sandals, your way of standing at rest, your way of sitting with arms folded not in judgment, but in calm readiness. And so you become something you never trained for. A monument. You still walk each morning, down past the Agoge's yard, past the public hearth to the edge of the river. The Eurytas is slower now, or maybe you are. The stones beneath your sandals feel familiar, like they've grown soft out of pity. Your son is 17. He walks beside you now, taller than you were at that age, stronger in the shoulders, softer in the mouth. He's already surpassed you in the gymnasium, bested his instructors in wrestling, and beaten the mess group's record for sprinting a shielded lap without losing breath. But still he listens when you speak. Today you stop at the edge of the training yard and say nothing. He waits. You finally murmur, "Remember the fig tree." He looks at you strangely, and then slowly nods. Because memory is the final lesson. Historians still argue whether Spartan elders were revered or just tolerated. Some believe they held the deepest political power. Others think they were little more than relics, but in every version they were watched. You are watched now, even when you're silent, especially when you're silent. At festivals, people look to you when the rituals begin. You carry no torch, no standard, but your presence seems to anchor things. You make no speeches, yet everyone straightens their backs when you enter the courtyard. You laugh a little more now, not loudly, just enough to feel it ripple across your ribs. You even cry once at the death of an old friend. Not in front of the fire or the assembly, but in the back of the house peeling garlic. Your wife pretends not to notice. She hands you the bread, sits beside you, No words are exchanged. That was the moment you understood Sparta teaches endurance, but love teaches survival. Here's your first quirky tidbit: Spartan elders were sometimes buried upright, standing tall even in death. A final reminder that no warrior ever really rests. Second fringe detail: there are whispered records of elder Spartans training secret groups of helots, not in weapons but in stories. Preserving myth geography names. Teaching legacy beneath the rules. You don't know if it's true, but you do catch your son whispering to a helot child near the stables. You say nothing. One evening, you return home to find your old spear missing from the wall. You know who took it. You say nothing then either. Instead, you walk to the cypress tree at the edge of the agoge and sit. Your knees ache. Your back hums, but your breath is steady, and you wait. Not for battle, not for death, just for the next sound, the next memory, the next ripple in this still and ancient life. The wind kicks up dust, the sky darkens with twilight, and you finally feel it settle. That Sparta was never about strength alone. It was about structure, a life lived with edges and shape, a rhythm to anchor you in the storm, a silence you grow into like a second skin. You close your eyes, and for the first time in a long time, you rest. The night stretches on now, long and gentle, like a river easing through its valley. You've walked the length of a Spartan life, from birth beneath strict hands, through cold mornings and sandaled feet, through laughter hidden behind discipline, through war and quiet and love and loss. You've seen that being a Spartan wasn't just a role or a rank or a red cloak. It was a choice made every day, whether anyone saw it or not. A choice to endure, to obey the rhythm, to shape yourself in silence and carry your past forward. And now, as your breath slows, as the stars blink quietly above that old stone city, you understand something simple. You were never meant to burn forever, just to carry the flame far enough for someone else to see. So now lay down your shield. Let the dust settle on your sandals. Let the fig tree bear fruit without your tending. Let the moonlight find your old spear and kiss it gently. And let your eyes close with the weight of a life carried fully. I'll be here with another story for you tomorrow night.